feminist, activist, and scholar, Bell Hooks, who argued that all steps towards freedom and justice in any culture are always dependent on mass-based literacy movements because degrees of literacy determine how we see what we see. Bell Hooks sadly passed away in 2021, but her philosophies have continued to live on in our hearts, our minds, and our stories. Since our community first adopted her teachings, we have produced a groundbreaking and transformative catalogue of anthologies, poetry collections, novels, and works of non-fiction that give voice to some of Australia's most brilliant yet underrepresented writers. Today, through both a reading and a critical dialogue, you will hear from 5 of the trailblazing poets within this collective. In order of appearance, our presenters include Jazz Money. Jazz is a Wiradjuri poet and artist whose practice is centered around poetics to produce works that encompass installation, performance, film, and print. Their most recent poetry collection, which you should all grab from the bookstore outside, is called Mark the Dawn. Katie Shammas. Katie is from the Galilee, Palestine, living on Darug country in northwest Sydney. Katie works in the environment and sustainability sector and is the mother of 2 daughters. She has been published in Meanjin, Povo, Kindling and Sage, and Red Room Poetry. Welcome, Katie, and Free Palestine. Mark Mariano. Mark is a Filipino-Australian writer, performer, and content producer from Doonside. He is published in Racism, Stories on Fear, Hate, and Bigotry. Natalia Figueroa Barroso. Natalia is a Uruguayan-Australian writer from Fairfield. She is published in numerous anthologies, including Sweatshop Women and Povo. Natalia's forthcoming debut novel is Hailstones Fell Without Rain. And last, but certainly not least, is Winnie Dunn. Winnie is a Tongan-Australian writer from Mount Druitt. She is the general manager of Sweatshop and the editor of several acclaimed anthologies, including Sweatshop Women and Another Australia. Winnie's debut novel, which you should also grab from the bookstore outside, is Dirt Poor Islanders. Please make all 5 writers feel very welcome.
Yiridumarang Nindigo. Oh, yeah, the mic is subtle from this angle. Yeah. Oh, it's subtle for you too. Okay, well. Yiridumarang Nindigo. Jazz Yuan Nadi, Radri Yana Baladu. Baramadago Darug, Nyurambang Warana. Yinjamara, Mandangu. It is a great honour to be here on Baramadago country, a place that has cared for me at many times when I've needed it. And it is a responsibility to care for country in return, that which nurtures us. I'm going to read some poems for you. And I've set a timer so that I keep track of things. The first one, they're all from my new book, which is called Mark the Dawn. The first one's a kind of fun one to start with, I guess. It's called There Isn't a Time Before It Begins. Of course, white fellas try to acknowledge things, but they do it wrong. They say, before we begin, I'd like to pay my respects, not understanding that there isn't a time before it begins. It has all already begun. A spiral in the every-when as we dance through all time deep, only as far from our story as country is from our feet. I wanted to read pieces that all sort of feel like they relate to the theme, Speak Australian. The next one is called Since Always, and it's dedicated to all the trans First Nations beloveds in my life with love and gratitude. It's called Since Always. And when they question whether our gorgeous queer bodies have thrived here since always, probing for proof, for evidence in their written records of dispossession, beat your chest, Sib, and say here. And now, oh yeah, you can clap or something. It's kind of so awkward, right? Sort of feel like you need to break the silence. I'll read this one. Is it on?
It's on, but it needs like direction.
Yeah, I was like, I either just yell at the crowd or commit. All right, there we go. Thank you. Proper producer. um, I wrote this piece during the referendum last year, and I never really expected to perform it, but I've really grown to love it. It's called Every Day It Grows, This Love. Our laughter has ancestors rattling the stars to join us. Our singing is ringing from the inland out to sea. The dancing has even the dust leaping in applause. And every day it grows, this love. Every day it grows. I want my babies to hold precious every moment we march for them. For every sacrifice our elders made to be cherished and carved into our histories. For when my babies are here, I do not want them to know the same horrors of then and now. That these struggles will be memories that we must not forget as the time begins to stretch from our triumphs. A new dawn is coming, and we keep laughing in our joy, singing in our truth, dancing in our futures. We keep holding each other close. We keep marching towards tomorrow, where every one of us is known and all time is precious. And every day it grows, this love. Every day it grows. Thank you. Maybe I'll close with one more love poem. How sappy. It's called Falling World. Of course, all things carry life and death held together. That's why I lift you up, as a vessel filled to brim with the spring water to the parched, tired pilgrims of my lips, and drink you greedy. All at once, and then we're falling to earth so very slowly, my love, and there is only forever and our ancestors on the other side of this divide. All I know to do is hold you tightly as lichen clings to the eternal stones, turning all things solid into softness, into soil, into habitat and home. This is the way our love holds great floodwaters strong, by saying we need one another, all, if we're to make any sense in this soft falling world. Thank you.
I'm Katie. Thanks for having me. I kind of feel I'm more a short story writer, but it's lovely to be at this poetry event. So I'm going to read you my story called She is the Village, which is in autumn's issue of Me Engine. I have returned. I stretch with the land from the hot core where it all began to the celestial sphere where it all ends. I expand into place with stories told by 500 falahin. First, the story of how the farmers built a stone church by the bay tree where Sitna El Ghada appears. I feel the leaves rustle in my hair and the bells in my chest. Then, the story that is a scar on my heart. How Nadimi almost left her daughter, my mother, by the village well. The stories mark my body with trees and springs and stones. I have returned to where Nadimi tends olive trees and where her husband Yusuf shepherds the goats roaming the hills. We live there together between earth and sky, keeping our home alive. It was Sitna El Ghada who helped us withstand the Ottomans and then the British. She appeared above her tree in a garment made of leaves, and with a bloody sword in hand, she threw the strangers out. I carve a place inside her trunk, and she tells me the story about the other strangers. It is the end of Mawsam el Zaytun, and the days are getting cooler. It is the happiest of seasons, when sheets are spread upon the land to catch the olives. I am the pitter-patter of the falling fruit vibrating through the soil. This harvest, the farmers are quiet, like the days when they will return a beloved to the earth. The intense rumbling through the valley has the priest and the elders talking and worrying into the night. Nadimi and Yusuf are in the olive groves with the other villagers. Yusuf and the men work quietly, shaking the olive branches with sticks. I am the thwack, thwack in the roots and the heat in the soil beneath his feet. The sweat glistens on his forehead, soaking the fabric edge of his white hatta. Nadimi's black hair is plaited and tied at the nape of her neck, hanging like a sumat flower down her white blouse. She's talking with her aunt as they collect the fallen fruit. I am so tired. She feeds all through the night, she says, feeling her breasts tingle as she looks down the olive grove to where her baby daughter, Milia, is swaddled safely under a tree by the well. I hear wheels grinding across the rocky road as the khaki trucks enter our village. Curled around my mother, I hold my breath and close my eyes tight. I don't want to see, though I feel my skin clench into knots. The doors slam and the black boots march toward the olive grove, stomping on the land and across my throat. Fuck off, one of them spits. Yalla, get up, get out, yells the soldier at Nadimi's back, pushing her out of the orchard toward the trucks. Baskets of olives scatter. Binti! Nadimi screams for her daughter. The scream splits the air and cuts down my spine. I crouch on the lip of the well and watch my grandmother wailing and thrashing at the soldiers through the grove of trees. She begs them to rescue her daughter. They prod and push her toward the truck. I drop to the ground and paste fistfuls of dry dirt on my tear-streaked cheeks. The baby's cry fills the wadi. It echoes through the valley and into my stomach. The soldiers stop for Nadimi to retrieve Milia, and then they do not stop. I hold my ears tight as gunshots are fired into the air and the soldiers marshal 500 fallahin into the black cavern of the waiting trucks. Squashed together like wheat bushels, they are taken away. Standing in the empty living room of our home, I hear only the lonely bleating from the goats in the hills. That night, with everyone gone, I harden into the stone walls of the house. Thunderous balls of fire shred me to rubble. I am the trees on the hills billowing black smoke as our village becomes a volcano. Then, silence.
Very tall. Sorry, apologies. I think you got that from my grandpa. So today I'll be reading from Down from Duneside Station, which is a poetry collection that was published with Sweatshop and Red Room Poetry. I'm so excited to read for them. 1 second. No, take your time. No rush. Got it? Thank you. Thank you very much. Isalang. Mama holds 3 grocery bags and her purse in one hand, while she holds my hand with the other. We left my brothers at the Video Easy, 2 stores down from Duneside Station. I wanted to stay with them so that they didn't just hire stupid action movies, but Mama never let go of my hand. Mama pulls me into a store with a name made of palm trees. Brittle brooms huddled in a corner. Sacks of rice sleep on the floor. 5 different types of coconut water chilling. Mama rifles through a neat pile of soup bases, like how I look for NSYNC in my CDs collection, desperate to start a one-man dance party in my room. Mama is looking for sinigang or adobo, I bet. Those are Mama's go-to for a stress-free dinner. anything that will stop the chicken thighs from sweating through the paper. Mama brings 4 packs to the counter, 2 sinigang and 2 adobo. They're thin and square and brown and plain, plainer than the pack of rainbow treats she's managed to sneak under them, just for me. Isa lang? The cashier asks, holding up the pack of polvoron. The cashier has the same brown and freckled complexion Mama has, but her face is oval while ours are round. Isa lang, Mama responds, trying to push the treats out of my sight. Just one, Mama repeats in English after some time, as she watches my eyes trail the glossy rainbow pack. The cashier's eyes are sunken, and Mama sighs between most words. Mama's Nokia vibrates in her purse, but she ignores it. Papa's the only one who has her number. The last phone call she had with him ended in a million swear words. It was just after we'd gotten off the train, and people were starting to stare. Mama pays in cash and grabs my arm, squeezing harder than she had before. I cry louder than Regine, the Filipina songstress trapped in the TV, teetering above the cashier's head. I'm sorry, anak. I'm wrapped in my mother's warmth, her shirt now home to my tears. Mama opens the treats, each carefully wrapped in cellophane. Isa lang, she says, handing me a green one, knowing it's my favorite color. This is cis. For the longest time, I was convinced my soul was pink while my body was brown. Mama was expecting twins, but only one made it to the world. Her name was meant to start with a V. I've long forgotten it because Mama would only ever mention her when I plucked white hairs from her shiny scalp. Gusto ko gawin niya ito, she would croon, wishing she was paying V a silver coin for every strand. Sometimes I would catch Mama staring at me. Her terracotta wrinkles would smooth, and her plump shoulders would drop whenever I would sing along to Mariah Carey in the bathroom. And I know you're shining down on me from heaven, like so many friends we've lost along the way. And I know eventually we'll be together one sweet day. Patiently, I'll see you in heaven. Mama would smile at us whenever my sisters dressed me in their clothes, their heels, and their finest hot dollar store makeup. My brothers joked about it all the time. That V was alive, just in my body, and I would laugh in brown pink. Was I walking the long way home through Woodcroft Lake just to make fun of the boys she was supposed to fall in love with? Was she meant to be the one throwing peace signs in my time zone sticker photos, making bunny ears behind my friends who were all much shorter than me? Perhaps I was looking for anything that explained why I was different from the other brown boys, who liked rugby and tits and spat everywhere. Brown boys I liked. I just don't think anyone outside of my superstitious Filipino family ever believes me when I tell them I can feel V tinkering around in my heart. Thank you.
And I'm very tiny. Can you hear me? Okay. So this is an excerpt from my poem, Driving Me Loca, which is published in Sweatshop's Povo. Rainbow lorikeet and windscreen collide. Green and red feathers fly, drifting off into el cielo. Disembodied meat, plumage and blood, blinding carnage. Papa pushes the emergency lights. The highway zooms past us. Bloody pájaro, he yells. His ink-black hair sails in the wind. His gaze, so salty it stings. Fractured road maps upon windshield glass. Sangre trickles into shards, cracked like veins. Sunshine bleeds through stained red shadows. Beak, wings, eyes, breast, talons. Plastic bag reserved for car sickness, for rubbish, now becomes our feathered accidents resting place. Cigarette lighter pops right out. The Winnie blue blazes from radiant orange to ash black. Smoke donut puffs out Papa's lips as he flicks his ciggy. Los milicos rolled one cigarro onto my cell floor, but no lighter. Dust clings to the dashboard. With my right index, I draw a road. A sooty fingerprint marks my fingertip. I don't know why he tells me these things. Maybe trauma has an end of sentence date. All's clean. Papa buckles in. The sea blue sky out my window is profundo. In its depths, clouds plunge and wash over azul, like the brisa envelops a bird's pinion. Saline aromas in the air, murmurs of waves caressing sand, surf over my ears. Burnt wood fires up my gut, it rumbles. Are we there yet, Papa? Radio frequencies are disrupted, words cut into static tongue. A change of gear, soon will be near. Back window frames new scenery. The land is parched, flaked, beige soil like my dry lips. Into the horizon, the sun dips. McDonald's drive-through steer into awkwardness. Greasy fingers, sugar rush, brain freeze. Bolus stuck to the roof of my mouth. Monosyllable replies lead to dead end. Detours help conversations descend. Pronto will get to swim. The words are choked by his moving tongue and rotating jaw, as if speaking with a mouthful of guilt. Speakers vibrate over the unanswered. Mist races up into the charcoal night, covering us in a blurred clutch. Fog lights unable to cut through the dense atmosphere. Forked road, left or right, Gregory's under moonlight. Narrow his direction, tunneling his vision. Alarms throb at Papa's temples. U-turn back into the familiar, or so it seemed, until we end up marking dirt with rubber. Marked wipers smear our sight. Tire stuck in the mud. His hardened hands begin to shovel, scooping up earth, searching for firm ground. Instead, ends up with soiled fists. Windows are shielded by frost. My breath dances with starlight, like a haunting spirit. Papa takes off his jumper and wraps his warmth around me. Disengage ratchet, pull up handbrake. Mija, we'll call it a night. No cuckoos outside to dread. Papa's here to hold you tight. Pretende que is your comfy bed. Pit stops turn into our destination. Morning dew froze onto my raised body hairs. I pull the hoodie's cords down and cocoon myself in. Day moon kissed by sun rays. Seagulls tango over el horizonte. In el glove box, there's confle. Inside sit miniature packets of Nutri-Grain. But there's no milk. We eat puffy bricks dry. All aquatic invertebrates are protected. No live bait. Size and bag limits apply. The ashtray is filled with butts. Al agua, pato, to the water duck. Crest and trough become one. The tide is low. Two waves collide, orchestrating white foam to curl and roar. I dip my head under. Salt stings my eyes. Bubbles float towards the sky. A baitless hook cuts through the water. Bright yellow fishing line leads me to Papa. Caught fish convulses towards death. Its fin slaps at the breeze. It reminds me of a kite talking in the wind, a flag at half-mast, or white sheets surrendering. Thank you.
Haku Fa'anga, throw the fa. Through the dense thicket of doa trees on the island of Elwa lived the children of Duagau'ia. Elwa, the most ancient island of Tonga, was a mountainous yet desolate region where only a brittle and tasteless fruit grew. Fa is what Duagau'ia and his children lived on. The wooden skin cracked their teeth. The tough flesh splintered into their bones. The core, hard as coral, was thrown over the cliff sides of Elwa and into the sea. And yet still, the Tongans grew. As the fa began to disappear, the full brown mouths of Duagau'ia's children grew wider and wider. In Tongan, they lamented. Doa, with her bark-rough limbs, cried, more. Fotu, with his bush-like hair, grumbled, more. Loi, with her windswept eyes, howled, more. The children's needs ringing in his ear, Duagau'ia tumbled through the thicket of trees and onto the cliffside where they threw far calls for all their lives. Duagau'ia, so reed-like, it was as if he'd already been eaten away. In a dry whisper, Duagau'ia spoke a final prayer to Dangaloa, the god of gods. Come eat the fa that I throw for you. In Tongan, this sounded like ha'okai ae fa deo laku atu. Into the moana, Duagau'ia leapt. One less mouth to feed meant more fa to eat. But even with their father's sacrifice, there were still too many empty stomachs. Slowly, yet steadily, the fa disappeared. No more, Doa admitted, her rough bark limbs sanded to bone. No more, Fotu sniped, his like brush hair wisped and splintered. No more, Loi sighed, her swept wind eyes stuck like roots. Together, the siblings tumbled through the dense thicket of Doa roots and on to the cliffside where their father had jumped so many years before. With a final prayer to Dangaloa, the god of gods, they said, come eat the fa I throw to you. In Tongan, this sounded like ha'okai ae fa deo laku atu. Mirroring the footsteps of their father, the three children leapt into Pulotu, the spirit realm.
Thank you, Jazz, Katie, Mark, Natalia, and Winnie. Let's have a discussion now. And we'll just, I've got the three questions that I want to ask all of you the same question, so we'll just go in order. Okay, so the first question, it's a really simple one, which is, why do you write?
In order. That was so beautiful. I write because I mean, there's lots of different ways to answer this, but one thing that I often come back to is a sense of responsibility, a sense of ability, being descended from people who are vivid, incredible storytellers who at many different times have been denied platforms to speak truth or to celebrate. And to me, I feel that so many folk have sacrificed so much for me to have the sort of education and privileges that I have, and I feel compelled into that space.
I guess I was going to say something similar. It's a question I've been thinking about a lot these past months. I think I came into writing as a diarist, so just always, my whole life, kept diaries as a way to process this world and emotions. And I don't really know, the only reason now I think of to write is this responsibility. Particularly, there's a long history of Palestinian writers being killed, from Ghassan Kanafani a long time ago now to more recently the genocide in Gaza has claimed a lot of writers, Hiba Abu Nada, Rifat Al-Arir. God, I'm nowhere near as good as those writers, but I feel like when you're in the diaspora, you do have a responsibility to, if you've got some kind of, writing may be my only creative skill, and I feel like then there's a responsibility to use that. And I think that particularly when, I'm from the inside, so my family are Palestinian citizens of Israel, and there's a real silencing, and I think about them a lot now when I struggle through writing, that responsibility of speaking when no one can.
Everyone on today's panel comes from cultures where storytelling is unconventional, conventional in the realms of Western conventions. Like Winnie, you mentioned in your book, or just when you launched your book, this beautiful tapestry that's woven, and that's in Tongue culture. What's that called? Natu. Yeah. In the Philippines, we'd tell our stories through recipes and Mariah Carey karaoke songs. So when you're born and brought into this world with certain storytelling tools, and when it's something that's coursing through your veins, I think the question now is more, why wouldn't I write? I think we got to take advantage of being this blended multicultural upbringing, and honor the craft in our own way, and tell stories that way. So yeah, why aren't I writing with this skill set that's born in me? Yeah.
So I took this question quite literally. So to answer this, I want to give you all a little backstory, because my introduction to language and storytelling is just a little bit complex. Despite being born on Darug country, I didn't say my first English word until I was 8. And this is because my parents migrated onto Gadigal land in 1975, which was 2 years after the Uruguay's civic military dictatorship theoretically began. And I was born in 1984. And a year after my birth, Uruguay was declared a so-called democracy again. And on hearing this news, my parents decided that they wanted to go back to where they came from, and and they sold everything again, and we went back when I was 2. But unfortunately, things were not as they expected in Uruguay, and so we returned to Darug country, and when we returned, I decided to become a selective mute for a year, because I just desperately wanted to go back home. I wanted to go back to Uruguay. I did not want to assimilate to this new country, to this new culture. I did not want to learn English. And because of this non-verbal experience, I had ample time conversing with my internal voice. And one day, my Year 2 teacher, Mrs. Savage, gave me, yeah, that was her name.
What a name.
Mrs. Savage. She gave me a notebook and a pencil. And in her body language, she told me to write. And so I did. I started writing diary entries, just like you, but in Spanish first. Then I started code switching, just adding an English word that I heard on the playground. And then eventually I started writing in Spanish and English. But then I got really bored at writing my daily life. So I started inventing stories to entertain myself, because I was not talking to anyone. And so, yeah, basically I started writing because Miss Savage gave me a notebook and a pencil, and I haven't stopped writing and creating stories since then.
Malo Lele. I was born into a large Tongan family from Mount Druitt in Western Sydney, not too far from here, also known as Struggle Street. So growing up, I was surrounded by limiting and demonising portrayals of my culture and community. Struggle Street was an infamous SBS doco which examined the lives of people from my hood as nothing but dangerous, impoverished and illiterate. And unfortunately, the only representation of Tongans in Australia available was Summer Heights High and Jonah from Tonga. The character known as Jonah appeared in both TV programs as a brown-faced minstrel, played by white Australian actor Chris Lilly, reinforcing classic brown male stereotypes. I think people often forget that he depicted Tongan children as hypersexual, violent, illiterate, and homophobic and misogynistic. So over the past decade and, growing up with those stereotypes, I never thought I would be able to write or tell my own story because my story was being told for me on Australian TVs. But over the past decade, there has been mounting pressure, I think, for the Australian arts sector to improve its diversity in its literature. And, I think within this context, we're experiencing a new wave of Australian literature, which I think is really profound. There's people on this panel sitting before you that are part of that, and many others. But however, in spite of the tremendous strides, that we see in this growing collection of what we're calling kind of Western Sydney literature, there are still very few mainstream representations of Tongan Australians on pages and screens produced by my own community. I think it's a really sad fact that Dirt Poor Islanders, my debut novel, is the first and currently only novel published and written by a Tongan Australian writer. So it's just me and Chris Lilly. So, this has made it difficult for Australian audiences, I think, to experience the complexity of contemporary Pacifica culture in this country. And, I think for so long, Pacificas in this country have been denied access to tell our stories, systemically so. And so I write to create literature, and I specifically wrote Dirt Poor Islanders in order to invite Australia into the reality of my forcibly marginalised community.
Thanks, everyone. The next question I have is, who do you write for? We'll start again with Jazz.
I feel really slack for not writing really beautiful, eloquent responses to these questions. Who do I write for?
So I just got to say, you are always beautiful and eloquent.
Correct.
Yeah, shout out to Jazz.
Correct.
Thanks. So I think a lot about being someone, like in a First Nations understanding of time and place, we exist in deep time. And we're connected constantly to every ancestor who has come before us and to all of our descendants. And I think, like I said in one of the poems, every time your foot touches country, you are connected to every story that's happened here. And we have histories that go back to the first sunrise. This place has always known song and story and gathering and community and love and joy. And for me, there is this great sense of, again, responsibility to be someone who is speaking in a moment in time and trying to speak some truth in a society that is built on myths, on a Western white society that is built on really destructive myths. And so for me, writing is like it's an act of protest, right? In very gentle ways sometimes, but to constantly be asserting a sovereign self and a complex sovereign self, you know, something that is trying to defy, not defy actively, just like isn't a stereotype. And to live in that complexity and that truth. And so for me, I suppose I'm writing in a sense to honour my ancestors, but to also leave a record for my descendants, and to be speaking from a community that is silenced is the wrong word, been denied, been forced into margins, been harmed. And so much of the writing that I do from this place of protest is actually just to assert our joy and our beauty and our sexiness and our cheekiness and all the good things as well, because like Australia tries to tell a story of suffering and pitying and deficit about my community, and that's as a queer person and as a black fella. And like, fuck them, they don't get to tell the story, we tell the story, and this is the truth of it, and that's why I write, and it's who I write for. I write for my community, communities.
You're really eloquent. So, I mean, there's a selfish element to writing. Like, I think in the first instance I do, when I'm sitting down to it, I write for myself, like, what do I want to say here? But then I guess when I think about that transition, like I'm pretty old, of just writing for myself in diaries to then joining Sweatshop over the past couple of years and writing for publication, I think the driver was perhaps, like I've got daughters, and leaving a record for them of the stories of my family. And so, yeah, I definitely think of them, but then also think back as well to my ancestors. So I guess like first draft is all about me, but then when I start thinking about a piece for a reader, it's my family, and that's my daughters, my mum, my sisters, my cousin. So She Is the Village, you know, I sent to my cousin, and was because that's really important to me. That's 100% who I write for, is like my immediate community as the reader.
Very similarly, I write for myself first to document and to chronicle, for me to then look back on when I'm older and sexy and like reminiscing on my 20s. Secondly, I then write for community, where these are communities that I serve, so fat folk, queer folk, Filipino people, Western Sydney people, bad bitches. And then third, which is less intentional and less important, are outsiders. I know that it's not my responsibility to educate others on my lived experience, but if others were to happen upon my work and read it and learn something, whether that be empathy or understanding, then I'm happy, I'm overjoyed. So those are the three that I write for, yeah.
For me, it depends on what I'm writing. I tend to pin a person in my mind, and I try to stay true to that intended audience. I'll give you 3 examples. So from the poem that I read out today, Driving Me Loca, I wrote that, which is a poem that explores childhood domestic violence through car metaphors. And I wrote that for my inner child, just to let her know that it's not her fault. Then with my first publication, Abuela's Mark, that was my love letter to my abuela. She passed away when I was 20, and I was just not, I wasn't ready to let her go. So that's why I wrote that for her. And then with my novel, Hailstones Fell Without Rain, I'm currently writing that for Amelia Sanjurjo Casal. Amelia was 41 years old and pregnant with her first child when she was detained on the 2nd of November 1977 by the civic military, by the Uruguay's military, who was backed by the US under the Operation Condor. Amelia was a militant against the civic military dictatorship and part of the Communist Party. And because of her political views and activism, Amelia was a threat to the state, and she was disappeared, which is a euphemism for assassinated. So my novel is for her and for the bones that are yet to tell their story. Because as I was started writing, they found Amelia's bones in June 2023, and they were finally identified to be hers in May 2024, which is just now. So at the moment, I'm writing for her.
The Pacifica community has a long, rich and complex history, I believe, with so-called Australia. And it predates settler colonialism. But unfortunately, the experiences of Tongan, Samoan, and other Pacifica identities have remained in the margins of broader so-called Australian society. The mainstream narratives about Pacificas in Australia, as I spoke about in my last answer, is often focused on islander men in sport, such as football and boxing, or on antisocial behaviour, such as domestic violence and alcohol abuse. Or you're in a rap crew called 1-4. As a result, Australians have missed out on understanding and enjoying the complex languages, traditions, and creativities that form the fabric of true Pacific cultures within and outside of Australia. And so in addition to impacting a broad Australian readership, the primary goal of my writing is to support and empower Pacificas themselves. Whilst it is true that negative stereotypes have demonised our communities, I also recognise that there are real issues affecting us that need to be addressed. Under 30% of Pacifica Australians will complete their higher school certificates, and under 5% will go on to tertiary education. Pacifica men in Australia are also overrepresented in the judicial system, with figures demonstrating that they make up 14% of incarcerated people in some states, despite only making up 1% of the entire population. Literature has always played an important role in shaping the way a community sees and imagines itself, and by extension, how it functions within a broader society. I think, therefore, it's really, really important that Pacifica Australians, particularly the young people, are provided with tangible, accessible, and uplifting examples of Pacifica Australian writing.
Thank you, everyone. Final question that we'll wrap up on today, and again, we'll start with Jazz, is what does it mean to speak Australian?
Okay, so one way to answer that is to say, and I think this is an answer that I'll give that is distinct. This is a continent that has hundreds of language groups. And the languages are so beautiful, and they tell us so much about this place and this world and the systems of knowledge and care that are held in our first languages. I want to give you like an example from my language, from Wiradjuri. And there are so many good ones, but one of my favourite words in Wiradjuri is Jira, which is our word for the future, but it's also our word for the womb. And there is such a complexity of understanding of time, of science, of responsibility, of care, of nourishment, of country that is held in something so simple as the dual meaning of Jira. Another word that I really love and I've written about a lot is billabong, which is anglicised into billabong. It's the word that most people here will know as like a pool of water which is disconnected from the river's flow, but part of the river system. And it means the same in Wiradjuri. But billabong has a dual meaning as well, which is the Milky Way night sky. So the solar system and all the stars within it and our home within it, in the vastest sense, is also contained in a pool of water, this thing that nourishes us and reflects the sky and reflects our ancestors and reflects our story. And I think if those two words can give you an insight to the beauty of what this place is and the knowledge that is held here, we're better off, right? And that I'm so lucky, truly, to be a descendant of a language so beautiful and a culture so rich, and one that has sustained itself for so very, very long. But I think everyone here has that invitation, and country offers that invitation to learn and to listen and to adopt those systems of care, because these are tried and tested, right? Like, we survived here for 100,000 or more years. Like, this place which has been extracted from for 250 years can exist in a totally self-sustaining world. And we already have the data for that. So, like, why wouldn't you listen to the real Australians about how to actually fucking save yourselves from the future that is collapsing around us, right? So learning the true languages of place, listening to country and learning responsibility, I think is what speaking Australian could be.
I'll speak that Australian, but I'm done with I'm done with speaking Australian. I guess, so for the longest time, me and my family are like model migrants, right? And I'm the only one in my family who has like this Anglo name. They all have these beautiful Arabic names. And even amongst like my extended family, I was always called the El Australiye. And it's actually now I feel banished, right? Like, I've operated really well in a speak Australian existence. But what for? So, I feel like to speak Australian now keeps me really small. And it also doesn't, and I'm going to cry actually, because I think about the sacrifice my parents made moving here, and not just moving here, moving away from community. Like, I grew up in a pretty white community, and because they thought that was better, and that they thought that that was a better opportunity for their children. And they came here like with Whitlam, and my dad got a free education and all this stuff, and they voted Labor their whole lives. And now I'm living in a time where those Labor governments are aiding and abetting the erasure of my people. So I'm really done speaking Australian. I'll just want to speak, and I want to speak. And there's like a real liberation in that. It's like hard, but there's a real liberation in just to speak with Katie, to speak with no boundaries, not even like just to speak as a Palestinian, just to speak. And I think that that's where, that's what I think of that shitty term.
Western Sydney is the Australia that I know the most. It houses 1/10 of the population. Blacktown is the second most diverse and multicultural suburb in all of Australia. To quote Jan Fran, Western Sydney is quintessential Australiana, And so when I hear Speak Australian, I want to reference the incredible dialect that we've created in Western Sydney, this great uniting language that second and third generation immigrants have created in playgrounds and have brought out into, you know, their adult worlds, words like gronk, sikkan, and oh my goodness, sekis. So people in Melbourne don't know what sekis are. Security guards. They don't know that it means security guards, which is insane to me. I was bewildered when I heard that from a white Melbourne colleague. And so I really want to really just express my gratitude to people like Carla from Bankstown and people like 1-4 who preserve and document this language. And obviously, of course, Sweatshop for taking their work into schools, taking their work outside and like really documenting this, because the Western Sydney language is beautiful and I want it to keep going and keep growing. So yeah, very thankful, very, very thankful.
For me, to speak Australian is the Fairfield City soundscape. So it's what I hear as I walk through the Fairfield Forum. It's Arabic, it's Vietnamese, it's Spanish, it's broken, it's fluent, it's Western Sydney vernaculars, it's a blend of languages, it's code switching from one to another. And yes, this is the Australian language that I was privileged to grow up alongside with and to speak. But also for me, to speak Australian is also a reminder that we are forced to speak a colonial language here, because this nation is a stolen, and this nation is and always will be Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander land.
Well, for me, I think speaking Australian is the theme of this entire event, strong language use. And I truly believe that Australian vernacular, especially in the western suburbs, is the hardest the English language can get. And apologies, Mohammed, but I did want to use an example from your latest novel, The Other Half of You, which you can get in the bookstore after this, in order to showcase what I mean. My entire childhood rushed up inside me, every conversation I ever had, every conversation I ever heard. Aussie cunt, leb cunt, Asian cunt, fob cunt, curry cunt, black cunt, sick cunt, mad cunt, bad cunt, hard cunt, sad cunt, pussy cunt, cock cunt, dog cunt, sexy cunt, shit cunt, dumb cunt, fat cunt, bitch cunt, gay cunt, rich cunt, poor cunt, hectic cunt, dead cunt. That's just how we speak here in the ghetto, Khalil. And so, I mean, each phrase in that passage I just read out, the word cunt means so many different things depending on the adjective that's in front of it. Sick cunt is someone who's cool, while dog cunt is someone who's irredeemably disloyal. Only in Australia. Collectively, I think Australians need to get over our own cultural cringe if we're ever going to uplift our literature into the global mainstream. This also means that we must accept that languages other than English is also Australian. The harder to pronounce, the more complex the language, the better. In Australia, there's no difference between salamat pagi and good morning, shukran and thanks, offer and love. And if you don't believe me, you're a racist, bro.
Thank you for this incredibly robust and critically conscious conversation. To me, speaking Australian is reading their books. So please head out to the bookstore, grab Jazz Money's new poetry collection, grab the Sweatshop anthologies that Katie, Mark and Natalia featured in, and please grab Dirt Poor Islanders. Thank you so much. Thank you so, so much. And if you have any questions, we decided that we wanted to use up the full hour, but if you do have any questions, we're happy to answer them outside at the signing table. See you there.